Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karava Vahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Chaiva Tato Jayamudirayet. Welcome back. In our last class we began this new section. It's a section contained in 3 chapters of the Aranya Parva, in which Bhima and Yuddhishthira encounter the Ajagara, the cobra. And let me just set the context for today's class. I'll retell the story. Today's class will not be so much story. Now we get the spiritual teachings beginning today, but good to put it in the context of the story. And in the story, the great Rajarshi, the king and rishi from ancient times, Nahusha, one of the ancient ancestors of the Pandavas and Kaurashas. So Nahusha insulted some brahmanas, including Agastya, and he was cursed by Agastya to become a cobra, Ajagara. Aja means goat. Gara, one who eats. A snake big enough to eat a baby goat is an Ajagara, a cobra. And the story continues on. Actually, the story begins. Bhima is wandering around in this delightful forest and encounters this Ajagara, who immediately seizes Bhima and is preparing to eat Bhima for dinner, so to speak. And an interesting observation we made in our last class is Bhima could most certainly extricate himself from the coils of this cobra. He has the power, he has the might to free himself. He doesn't. Why? Because, remember we had this discussion, because of his wrong interpretation of the doctrine of karma. He interpreted the doctrine of karma in such a way as to minimize the effect of prayatna, his personal effort, and to maximize the effect of daiva, the unfoldment of his karma. So basically, Bhima concluded that Bhima concluded that it would be futile to try to get release from this cobra. So therefore, why try? And Bhima decided to surrender himself to his fate, which turned out to be a mistake. Fortunately, his big brother, Yuddhishthira, noticed that Bhima was missing and followed Bhima's footprints. Bhima was kind of a very big guy, so he left very clear footprints in the ground. And Yuddhishthira was able to follow his footprints. He caught up with, and he found Bhima encircled by the coils of the snake. And at the very end of the last class, then we see Yuddhishthira asking Bhima, "What happened to you?" Or if he spoke American English, "How did you get into this mess?" So he asks. And with that brief introduction, we'll pick up the thread where we left off. Sadharma rajam ha lakshya, sadharma rajam ha bhrata bhrataram agrajam, bhrata bhrataram katayamasa tat sarvam, katayamasa tat grahanari vicheshtitam, grahanari vicheshtitam. Saha bhrata that brother, referring to Bhima. Remember, Yuddhishthira has just found Bhima and addressed him. So Saha Bhrata, that brother Bhima, what did he do? Alakshya, having seen Dharmarajam. Dharmaraja, one of the many names for Yuddhishthira, the king of Dharma. Also remember that Dharma was his father as Yamaraja, Dharmaraja. So seeing his brother, his Bhrataram in the bottom, in the second line, who is Agrajam, firstborn, his elder brother. Bhima, seeing his elder brother, Yuddhishthira, what did he do? Tat sarvam katayamasa. He told him the whole story. Seeing the Ajagara in the cave, having the Ajagara wrap him up in his coils, and being unable to escape. So tat sarvam, all of that, katayamasa. He told all of that to Yuddhishthira, all of that grahanadi, about getting caught, etc. He taught all of that to Yuddhishthira, who taught Bhima. Bhima, who was vicheshtitam. It's actually an adverb here. Being immobilized. How's that for translation? Vicheshtitam. Being immobilized. Remember, he could have freed himself. He was trapped because of his own wrong conclusion. Would you allow me to expand on that a little bit? Because there's a lot of Vedanta in that. Bhima is trapped not because of a lack of strength. He has enough strength to free himself. He is trapped because of his wrong conclusion. His conclusion that effort is useless and everything is a result of karma. So it's a wrong conclusion that has trapped him. This is so Vedantic. I can't help but make this connection. It's not really present in the text or the commentary, but it just seems quite obvious. And that is, Vedanta teaches that everyone also is trapped in a world, in a life of suffering. Just as Bhima is trapped by the snake, so then what would the snake represent? Worldly suffering. So as Bhima is trapped by the snake, in the same way, all people are trapped by worldly suffering. Why is Bhima trapped by the snake? Because of his wrong conclusion. Or we could say, because of ignorance. Bhima is trapped because of ignorance. He doesn't know correctly that his own effort, prayatna, could easily free him from that snake. Due to his wrong conclusion, due to his ignorance, he remains trapped. Not only trapped, but what comes next? He becomes the cobra's lunch. So it's a good metaphor, because right now you are trapped, and what comes next? Oh, do you follow the metaphor? Bhima is trapped and on the precipice of death. In the same way, we are trapped in a life of worldly suffering. On the precipice of death means whenever it comes. 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, we don't know. But it'll come. With that we know. So this is a metaphor. And here comes the Vedanta. Just as Bhima is actually trapped, not due to the cobra, but due to his wrong conclusion and ignorance, in the same way you are trapped by your wrong conclusion, by your ignorance. What is that wrong conclusion? The wrong conclusion is this: for my happiness and contentment, I need A, B, C, and D. If I get A, B, C, and D, I'll be content. If I get A and B, I'll be half content. If I get only A, I'll be a quarter content. If I don't get any, I'll be miserable, absolutely miserable. These are the kinds of conclusions we all make in life. Everyone makes in life. The conclusions are wrong, absolutely wrong. You can be content without A, B, C, and D. You can be content without any of that. And how do we know it so clearly? We've talked about this in so many contexts. What we're talking about, of course, is the vision of the ancient rishis, which is that your true nature is already full and complete. The essence of who you are, the truth of who you are, the conscious being by whom your mind's activities are known. I'll say that again. The truth of who you are, the conscious being by whom your mind's activities are known, is already full and complete and content. But due to your wrong conclusions, I'll only be content if I have A, B, C, and D. It's your wrong conclusion that creates the discontentment. If you didn't have that wrong conclusion, you'd be content. And the evidence we've given of that so many times in the context of meditation. Suppose you sit down to meditate and you have neither A, B, C, or D. So how do you feel? Miserable. Then you meditate. And in meditation, your mind becomes quiet. When your mind is quiet, you're not thinking about how miserable you are because you don't have A, B, C, or D. In fact, in meditation, you feel perfectly content. Why is it that you feel perfectly content in meditation? Because you've dropped that conclusion that you can only be content if you get A, B, C, or D. But in meditation, you have none of them, and you find yourself content. What is the take-home message, as they say? You don't need A, B, C, and D to be content. In fact, what you need to do is drop your wrong conclusion that your life will only be content if you have A, B, C, and D. If you can drop that wrong conclusion, you can discover contentment here and now. Therefore, as like Bhima is trapped by the snake, really speaking, he's not trapped by the snake, he's trapped by his own wrong conclusion and ignorance. In the same way, you're not trapped by this world. And I know some of you feel like it. You're trapped because at work your boss is in a bad mood, and you have this huge mortgage and debt to pay, and you've got these problems and those problems and the health problems and this and that and the other thing. And you feel trapped by all of this, and you conclude, how can I possibly be content unless all of these problems, A, B, C, and D, get resolved? Suppose you can drop that conclusion. That conclusion that you can only be content if these problems are resolved, you'll discover contentment is now. Just like in meditation. Not only in meditation. A nice example Puja Swami Tadatmananda liked to give. He observed that why do you become happy? If somebody tells you a joke, you become happy. It's just nice to observe. By the way, those of you who knew him well, you know that he loves to tell jokes. And he was really good at it. So tell me, why is it that a simple joke can make you laugh? What is it about the power of a joke that can make you laugh? Suppose you're absolutely miserable, and somebody tells you a really good laugh, a really good joke. Notice, no matter how miserable you are, if the joke is good, you laugh. What's going on? You could be in your deathbed. And if somebody tells you a really good, it has to be the right joke. It has to be good enough. Let's be clear about that. But there are good jokes. Somebody can tell you a wonderful, delightful joke, and even laying there getting ready for death, you'll laugh. Absolutely. I can't help, whenever I tell this topic, I have a favorite joke. I have to tell you this. I can't avoid it. So this was back in the 1980s, I think in my first travel in India. So I'm with a group of Puja Swami Dayananda students. We're on a train. And what we would do is Puja Swamiji would give some lectures, then he'd fly to his next destination to give more lectures, and we'd chase after him on a train. So we did this hopping all over the country. We did this for several months. It was great. So we're on a train traveling, and the group was a mixture of Indians and Westerners. And one of the Westerners was this young woman from Australia. And, she had the typical heavy Australian accent. Of course, here's the scene. Early morning, we're all waking up, and there's a conversation between this Australian girl and a good friend of mine who was a brahmachari, religious student from Andhra. So he had a heavy Telugu accent. She had a heavy Australian accent. And the train is already a little noisy, so they're having a conversation, and it's not going so well. And of course, there's several of us kind of just sitting and observing, and this is what we observed. So the Telugu friend, my friend from Andhra, the brahmachari, was asking about her travels. She had traveled all over. She had been to the U.S., and now she's going to India. And so my friend had asked her, have you been to the United States? She says yes. Have you been to, South Africa? She says yes. And he says, have you been to, excuse me, I'm telling the story wrong. See, that's the rule. If you're going to tell a story, you have to tell it right. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Forget all of that. So he just, early morning, they're having a conversation, and he asks her, have you been to Thailand? Was her question. His question. So the brahmachari with a heavy Andhra accent, Telugu accent, asks her, have you been to Thailand? She couldn't make out what he said. She thought he had said, have you been to toilet? We were traveling second class on that train, and talking about toilets is not something you generally want to do. Anyway, but she misunderstood him. She thought, have you been to, he asked, have you been to Thailand? She heard, have you been to toilet? She was really embarrassed, but she kind of paused and screwed up her face, and she said, well, yes. And he lit up. He was delighted. Oh, how was it? Okay. That really happened. That I promise you, that's exactly how it happened. We laughed about it for days. Now, it's a funny joke, but this is a kind of a serious topic. Suppose you're laying on your deathbed, and I come and tell you this joke. It could work, right? So there you are, laying, getting ready to die, miserable, and you start laughing. How can a silly joke make you laugh? And this was Pujya Swamiji's observation. He said the power of a joke is it makes you drop all of your negative thinking. The way jokes work, do you know the psychology of a joke? There's a surprise. The essence of every joke is a surprise, and it's the element of surprise. You hear something you didn't expect. The element of surprise is what makes a punchline work. In that surprise, our attention is arrested, and when our attention is arrested, our attention is removed from everything else. As a result, for a few moments, you forget about everything. For a few moments, you forget about how miserable you are. For a few moments, you forget that you're about to die. Seriously. For a few moments, you drop all of that. And you find yourself happy, delighted. Notice what makes you happy is not so much the presence of something, but rather the absence of something. You follow that? The power, it's not that a joke is so powerful, but if it's good enough to make you drop your negative thinking, your wrong conclusions, to drop your excessive concern about all your problems, about A, B, C, and D that you don't have, if the joke is good enough, you find yourself happy. The power of that joke is to remove all that negative thinking. This is what Pujya Swamiji used to point out as proof that you don't need to solve any problems for the sake of your contentment. You don't need to acquire anything for the sake of your contentment, but that contentment is available here and now if you can just drop all those wrong conclusions. Got it? So this is the connection to our story. Bhima is trapped not by the snake. Bhima is trapped by his wrong conclusions. If Bhima could drop his wrong conclusions, he could easily free himself from the snake. If you can drop your wrong conclusions with the help of these teachings, you can free yourself from suffering. This is Vedanta, very powerful. Okay, nice to make that connection. So, Bhima addresses his older brother, tells him the whole miserable story about what's happening. Actually, Bhima is not miserable. He's actually okay. He is ready to be Ajagara's lunch. This, remember, we said that's due to the misinterpretation of the doctrine of karma. He is surrendered to his fate improperly so. He has the power to extricate himself, but he doesn't recognize that due to his ignorance. Okay, enough. Yuddhishthira vacha, Yuddhishthira vacha, kirmahritya viditva va, kirmahritya viditva, Prithiste syad bhujangama, prithiste syad bhujangama, kimaharam prayachami, kimaharam prayachami, katham munched bhavanimam, katham munched bhavanimam. So Yuddhishthira now addresses not his brother Bhima, but addresses the snake, Ajagara, who's actually the rishi Nahusha. So Yuddhishthira asks him, Kim ahritya, what can I bring you? Actually, look at the last line, you'll get the context. Katham munchet bhavan. Bhavan, O Ajagara, O snake, Bhavan, he addresses him it's a formal you in Sanskrit, is Bhavan. Bhavan, translate, O sir. That would be a common translation. Bhavan, Mr. Snake, sir. Katham munchet imam. Under what conditions would you free him? Bhima, under what conditions would you free my brother, Bhima? And now go back to the beginning. Kim ahritya, what can I bring you? Kim viditvava, or what can I tell you? Knowing what or attaining what would you agree to free my brother? Pritihi te syat, what could I do to please you so that you would free my brother, Bhujangama, O great snake? Kimaharam prayachami. Yuddhishthira figures out that Ajagara is hungry and Bhima is going to be his lunch, but Yuddhishthira is thinking, maybe I can bring you something even better to eat than my brother Bhima. So, kim aharam, what food prayachami can I bring to feed you? So under what conditions would you free my brother, oh Mr. Snake? Snake, sir. Sarpavacha sarpa prashnanucharitans tu tvam prashnanuchariprant vyaharishyasi chen mama vyaharishyasi chen atapaschad vimoksyami bhrataram te vrikodaram bhrataram te. So what are the conditions under which Ajagara would free Bhima? He says in the second line, Chet, if Vyaharishyasi, if you tell mama prashnan, if you answer my questions, ucharitan, which are uttered, which are asked, tvam, of you. If you answer these questions of mine, the questions that I'm about to ask you, Ajagara says, ata, then, paschat, afterwards, vimokshyami, I will free brataram, te, your brother vrikodaram, your brother Bhima, the one who has an uda. Remember the meaning of that? The one whose belly is like a wolf. So he wasn't fat. He was mighty and powerful. You need to remember the curse of Agastya. The curse of Agastya was that Nahusha would remain as a cobra until and unless his questions were answered by a wise person. Now that's the key, by a wise person, a really wise person. That's why Ajagara didn't ask Bhima. Bhima was known for his strength. Bhima was not known for his wisdom. On the other hand, and we'll see in just a few moments, that Ajagara recognized in Yuddhishthira, here is an intelligent, wise person, and so if this intelligent, wise person can answer my questions, then I can be freed from my curse to be the cobra, and then naturally, if he's no longer a cobra, why would he be interested in eating Bhima? If he returns to being Nahusha, he won't eat. So he says, Ata paschat, then afterwards, Mokha vimokshyami, I will free te brataram, your brother. And Yuddhishthira replies, Yuddhishthira vacha, Yuddhishthira bruhi sarpa yatha kamam, bruhi sarpa prativakshyami te vachaha, prativakshyami api chet shaknuyam pritim, api chet shaknuyam ahartum te bhujangama, ahartum bruhi sarpa. Sarpa, O snake, bruhi, tell me. Yatha kamam, as you please. Prativakshyami, tell me your questions, as you please. Prativakshyami te vachaha, I will answer. Te vachaha, your questions. Prativakshyami, I will answer. Api chet shaknuyam pritim, if I can please you, if I can answer your questions and excuse me. He says, I will answer your questions and Shaknuyam pritim, if I can please you, arhatum te bhujangama. Bhujangama, O snake, I'll paraphrase, I'll do the best I can to answer your questions to your full satisfaction. Yuddhishthira says, why? Because he wants to get his brother Bhima released from the coils of the Ajagara. Sarpavacha sarpa brahmana ko bhavet rajan, brahmana ko bhavet vedyam kim cha Yuddhishthira, vedyam kim cha Yuddhishthira. Vedyam kim cha Yuddhishthira, 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 vedyam kim cha Yuddh Bravi hyatimatim tvam hi bravi hyatimatim Vakyar hanumami yahe Vakyar hanumami mahe. Nice verb, hanumami mahe, for our Sanskrit students. All right. So, what are the cobra's questions? Ajagara has 2 questions that he puts to Yuddhishthira, and you can imagine that they're not going to be ordinary questions. So what are these 2 questions put by Ajagara to Yuddhishthira? First question, Brahmanaha ko bhavet Rajan? Rajan, O king, kaha Brahmanaha? Who is a Brahmana? Now, you might say, what? No, why is he asking this question? Why is the cobra asking this question of Yuddhishthira? So there are 2 ways of answering it. One is it relates to the curse of Agastya who was a Brahmana who was misunderstood and mistreated by Nahusha. So that's one way of explaining it. But there's actually a much more obvious way of explaining it. A few moments ago I told you a story. It was a nice story. It was a story meant to teach you something. Obviously it wasn't a story about a toilet. It was a story meant to teach you something. So who's telling this story? Vyasa is telling this story. And Vyasa is telling this story not merely to tell you about a discussion between Ajagara and Yuddhishthira, any more than my point was to tell you about a toilet on a train. Vyasa's point is to teach you via these stories. So these are stories which are not merely to entertain, these are stories which are told for the sake of teaching. So what does Vyasa want to teach us? He wants to teach us kaha brahmanaha, who is really a brahmana. So that's one of the 2 things. So what Vyasa wants to teach is put into the mouth of the cobra, so to speak, for the sake of teaching. So first of the 2 questions, kaha brahmanaha, who is truly a brahmana? And second question, kim vedyam cha Yuddhishthira? Yuddhishthira, kim vedyam? What is it that is truly to be known? Of all the things in the world which can be known, kim, what is the one thing which is of ultimate importance, which is really vedyam, the most important thing to know? These are the 2 questions. Kaha brahmanaha, who is a brahmana? And kim vedyam, what is it that is ultimately to be known in life? He says, bravihi, tell me, O Yuddhishthira. Why? Look at the last line. Vakyaihi anumami mahe. Remember we said that Nahusha could only be released from the Agastya's curse if he asks a wise person. He didn't ask Bhima. He is asking Yuddhishthira. Why? He says, Vakyaihi, from your words, Ajagara has listened to Yudhishthira's statements. By the way, when you speak to someone, if you hear just a sentence or 2, you know so much about that person, right? Just from their words. Oftentimes from their words, first of all, you know where they come from. So, are they from this country? Are they from India? And even if they're from India, you generally get a sense of what part of the country they're from, just by the way they speak. Also, from their choice of vocabulary and the content, you also get the idea, is this person highly educated, medium educated, or not educated at all? Even in a sentence or 2. You can tell so much just from a few words from a person. So here, Ajagara has just had this very brief conversation with Yuddhishthira, and Ajagara observes that Vakyaihi, by your words, anumamimahe, I can infer. It's actually plural. This is a royal we. We can infer from your words, we can infer what? Atimatim tvam hi. You indeed are extremely intelligent. From your words, I can infer that you are extremely intelligent. Therefore, Yuddhishthira, I put to you these two questions. Please tell me, ko brahmana, who is truly a brahmana, and kim vedyam, what is the ultimate thing to be known in life? So he puts these two questions to Yuddhishthira for the sake of becoming free, for two reasons. One is to become free from Agastya's curse, but what is the second reason? So Vyasa can teach us these two subjects. Vyasa puts these questions in the mouth of the Ajagara. All right. Yuddhishthira vacha, Yuddhishthira satyam dhanam kshamha shilam, satyam dhamam anrashamsyam damo ghrana, anrashamsyam drishyante yatra nagendra, drishyantam sabrahmanayati smritaha, sabrahmanayati smritaha. Saha brahmanaha, in the last line. Saha brahmana, one is a brahmana. Iti smritaha, thus it is known, it is remembered, it is understood that saha brahmana, that person is a brahmana. Third line, yatra, in whom drishyante, these qualities are seen. That person is a brahmana, yatra, in whom drishyante, certain traits are seen. Nagendra, Naga Indra, king of the snakes. O great snake, when these things are seen, then you know that person is a brahmana. When what things are seen? Satyam, truthfulness. Dhanam, charity. Kshama, patience, understanding. Shilam, good conduct. Anrashamsyam, beautiful word, compassion. Damaha, self-control. Grina, kindness, tenderness. When these are seen, yatra, in whom these traits are seen, saha brahmanaha, that person is a brahmana. Now, please note what he's not saying. He's not saying a brahmana is someone born, if father is a brahmana and mother is a brahmana, then that person is a brahmana. That's what he's not saying. This is a very important topic. It's been taught in the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, some of you will remember chapter 18 we studied not too many months ago. And in chapter 18, it goes on for several verses, but one verse that introduces the same topic. Shri Krishna says, Brahmana kshatriya visham shudranam cha parantapa karmani pravibhaktani sobhava prabhavaihi gunaihi. He says, how to distinguish amongst these four. Right away we get in trouble. If you say four castes, you've already made a mistake. Why have you made a mistake? You look up the word caste in a Sanskrit dictionary. It ain't there. The word caste is not a Sanskrit word. In fact, we've discussed this long ago. Do you remember what language? This is very odd. What language does the word caste come from? Portuguese. How strange is that? So the Portuguese had settlements on both coasts of India, and those Portuguese settlers had brought their language, and they used this word to describe. The Sanskrit word is varna. Now, varna has several meanings. Of common meaning for varna is color, but that doesn't apply at all here. A better meaning for varna in this group is, in this context, the meaning of varna is group. Varna means a group. And there are two ways of defining these four groups. These four groups have been discussed from the Vedas onwards. So let's talk about these four varnas, these four groups. There are two ways of understanding these groups. One is the very conventional way, and that is, if your mother's varna is Brahmana and your father's varna is Brahmana, you are a Brahmana. We would call this Jati Brahmana. That is, you are a Brahmana by birth, by family of birth. And that's a very conventional understanding, but that's clearly not what Yuddhishthira, that's not what Yuddhishthira is saying here. He's saying the Brahmana is one who has all these qualities, all these traits, and that's exactly what Sri Krishna said also when he said, I already forget, what did he forgot the line, where he said, Karmani pravibhaktani. These four so-called castes, the four varnas, are pravibhaktani. They are distinguished by their karmas, by their actions which are sobhava jaihi gunaihi, which are born from inner qualities. Based on your inner qualities will be your behavior. These are the inner qualities. A person who has these qualities, satyam, dhanam, etc., that person's behavior is going to reflect those qualities. If you have a quality for satyam, for speaking truth, what will be your behavior? You'll speak truth. If you have a value for dhanam, charity, what will be your behavior? You'll be generous. So what Yuddhishthira gives is a series of gunas or qualities that distinguish the Brahmana. What Sri Krishna says is that that which varna you belong in, which varna you are in, depends on your behavior which is born of these qualities. So notice it comes down to qualities, which is why the contrasting word is guna Brahmana, which is to say, you can be a Brahmana based on your birth, or you can be a Brahmana based on your inner qualities. So here, the Sri Krishna and the Bhagavad Gita, by the way, the Bhagavad Gita comes, what book are we in of the Mahabharata? We're in the Aranya Parva, which is third book. When will we get to the Bhagavad Gita? I think it's eighth book, if I remember right. So it's yet to come in the Mahabharata, but we're seeing the same teachings, not surprisingly. These are Vyasa's teachings. Vyasa teaching us about what Varna is really all about. And he makes it very clear, and it's going to become, this is just a beginning. So we're going to see a rather extensive exploration of this topic, and that is what really makes you a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra. What really makes you one of these four varnas is not your jati, not your birth. What is it that distinguishes your varna is your guna, your qualities, and how those qualities are expressed as your karma, as your behavior. We're going to see that. I won't talk further about it because Yuddhishthira himself is going to explain in coming verses. So you remember that Ajagara asked two questions. First question was Kaha Brahmanaha, who is a Brahmana. Second question is Vedyam Kim, what is it to be known? So Yuddhishthira is giving him the short form of the answer. So he has a one-verse answer for who is a Brahmana, and now we see a one-verse answer for what is to be known. Vedyam sarpa param brahma, Vedyam sarpa param brahma, nirdukam asukam chayata, nirdukam asukam, yatra gatva na shochanti, yatra gatva, bhavatah kyam vivakshitam, bhavatah kyam. Vedyam sarpa param brahma. Sarpa, O snake. Vedyam, what is ultimately to be known in life is what? Param Brahma. He goes to the max, as we say in American English. He gives this ultimate answer. What is meant to be known in life is Parabrahma, that absolute reality because of which everything exists. The underlying reality because of which the cosmos exists. The underlying reality because of which your body and mind exist. The underlying reality which is not different from your own consciousness. That consciousness is also that same Brahman. So it is the truth of all. Brahman is the truth of all. And he goes on to say that Param Brahma, that truth of all, the reality underlying everything, is nirdukam asukam chayat. It is yat, that which is nirdukam, free from dukkha. That sounds pretty good. Then he says asukam is also free from sukha. You know what? Free from dukkha, free from sukha means beyond sukha and dukkha. Let's be very clear that sukha and dukkha, happiness and pain, are transient emotions. So often, a misunderstanding is made by students of Vedanta that moksha, enlightenment, is a condition of permanent happiness. Let's examine that briefly. Does that make sense? Can moksha be a state of permanent happiness? First of all, happiness is an emotion. Is there such a thing as a permanent emotion? Is it possible to have a permanent emotion? The very nature of emotions is that they change and go on changing forever. So it is not possible to have a permanent emotion of sukha. Then, I'm sorry. I don't know, where did that thought go? It's not possible to have a permanent thought of sukha, nor would it be desirable. You've heard me make this observation before, and that is compassion involves our ability to feel another person's pain. Right? That's what the word compassion literally means. What? Co-passion. Compassion, with passion, to feel what another person feels is compassion. So if the other person is crying and you feel sukha, will you really be compassionate to that person? In fact, you'll tell the other person, stop crying, cheer up, which is not particularly helpful if somebody is crying and miserable. They need some care. They need your understanding. They need compassion. If you experienced permanent sukha, which is impossible anyway, but if you experienced permanent sukha, you would be incapable of compassion. So, how do we understand enlightenment? Well, in our discussion earlier in this class, we said compassion was not defined in terms of happiness or sadness, but rather in terms of contentment. If you feel perfectly content. And this is not our topic, so I won't go further into it, but that's why he says that Brahman is nirdukam asukam. Brahman is beyond sukha and dukkha. In fact, the way to understand that in a Vedantic sense is that sukha and dukkha belong to your mind. The consciousness by which your mind is known, the consciousness by which the sadness and pain in your mind are known, that consciousness is beyond them, correct? Happiness and pain belong to your mind. The consciousness by which those two are known is beyond. And that's why Brahman here is called nirdukam asukham, that which is beyond pleasure and pain. Now, we're not going to spend long on this. In fact, Yuddhishthira only gives a one-verse answer to this question. But there's an important point to be made here, and that is, so often we get the idea that as soon as we start talking about Brahman and Atma and Maya and all of this stuff, it starts to sound so philosophical and so abstract. If it's so philosophical and so abstract, you could legitimately ask the question, what value does it have in life? If it is philosophical and abstract, it may seem like it has no value in life, which is why Yuddhishthira adds, yatra gatva, when one has gone there, but it means when one has known that, when one has understood that Parabrahma, that ultimate reality, then what? Nashochanti, they don't suffer anymore. Knowing this Parabrahma puts an end to suffering. That's a unique knowledge. Tell me, if you know everything about computers, will that put an end to suffering? If you know everything about medicine, will that put an end to suffering? If you know everything about cooking, or whatever it is, knowledge in general doesn't put an end to suffering. This particular knowledge does indeed put an end to suffering. Why? Go back to our example before. You suffer because of your wrong conclusions. Your conclusions that you need A, B, C, and D in order to be content and happy in life. Suppose you can get rid of those wrong conclusions, you'd be content. What do you need to get rid of those wrong conclusions? Knowledge. Knowledge of computers will get rid of your wrong conclusions? No. Knowledge of medicine will get rid of your wrong conclusions? No. Knowledge of Parabrahma, which is your true self, will get rid of the wrong conclusions and free you from suffering. Therefore, tatra gatva, those who have discovered the truth of Parabrahma, nashochanti, they become free from suffering, full stop. Then, so Yuddhishthira has given a very brief answer. So the Sarpa, the Ajagara, asked the two questions, who is a Brahmana and what is ultimately to be known? And in two verses, Yuddhishthira gives the answer briefly, and then Yuddhishthira concludes by saying, Bhavataha kim vivakshitam. Says, what do you say? Bhavataha, for you, kim vivakshitam, what is to be said? What is to be said for you means what? What do you say? What is your response? What do you want to say next? And Sarpu vacha, sarpu, shudreshvapi cha satyam cha, shudreshvapi cha satyam, danam akrodha heva cha, danam akrodha, anrasham ahimsa cha, anrasham Ghrana chaiva Yuddhishthira, Ghrana. So the Sarpa addresses him, O Yuddhishthira. He says, Shudreshu api, in Shudras, he says, you find satyam, you find truth, you find dhanam, charity. These are the same qualities that he attributed. Yuddhishthira said that a Brahmana has these qualities. What qualities? Satyam and Dhanam, etc. And what is the snake's reply? It says, the qualities that you say a Brahmana possesses, even a Shudra can possess. So that's what the Ajagara says. Shudreshu api. Even in Shudras, you find these qualities. What qualities? Satyam, truthfulness. Dhanam, generosity. Akrodham, freedom from anger. Anrashamsyam, compassion. Ahimsa, not hurting anyone. Granacha, tenderness. O Yuddhishthira, the qualities that you said define a Brahmana, those same qualities you can find in a Shudra. So what kind of definition are you giving me? Yuddhishthira replies, Yuddhishthira vacha, Shudre chaitad bhave lakshyam, Shudre chaitad bhave lakshyam, Dvaje tatchana vidyate, Dvaje tatchana, Navai shudro bhavet shudro, Navai shudro bhavet Brahmano nacha brahmanaha, Brahmano. So Yudhishthira's reply is, Shudraha chet bhavet lakshyam. Suppose in a Shudra you find these qualities. Lakshyam, these indicators are present, these qualities are present in a Shudra. Suppose you find in a Shudra, you find these qualities. Look at the third line. He says, Navai Shudraha bhavet Shudraha. He says, that Shudra is not a Shudra. Huh? No, look what he's saying. If those qualities of a Brahmana are found in a Shudra, that Shudra is no Shudra. Further, he says, Dvaje tatchana vidyate. If those qualities are not present in a Dvija, in a Brahmana, actually Dvija is Brahmana, Kshatriya and Vaishya, technically speaking. Dvija means twice born, which would include Brahmanas, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas. So if those qualities are not present in a twice-born, Brahmana, and the fourth line, Brahmana, nacha Brahmana, that Brahmana is not a Brahmana. A Shudra who has these good qualities is not a Shudra. A Brahmana who doesn't have these qualities is not a Brahmana. Why is it sounding so confusing? Because we're mixing these two meanings. So what is the confusion between Ajagara and Yuddhishthira? Ajagara is using this definition. Yuddhishthira is using this definition. Ajagara is thinking in terms of birth, jati. Yuddhishthira is thinking in terms of guna, qualities. So this is what the Bhagavad Gita teaches. This is what Yuddhishthira is teaching. Then what happened? Why did this Varna system become such a disaster in Indian culture? And it did. No one can deny that it became a real horrible social problem and continues in a lesser extent even today. Continues to be a terrible social problem. What is the problem? The problem is this isn't understood. That's what it comes down to. If you cling to this definition based on jati, based on birth, you will make a mess of the whole thing. If you were to give up that definition and use a definition of Varna based on guna, all of these problems go away. The problems of discrimination, etc., utterly go away. Then the next legitimate question is to ask then is, why do so many people cling to the wrong understanding, to the wrong meaning? And here we have to admit a particularly unfortunate problem. And the unfortunate problem is those who were teaching the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita were very often Brahmanas. And some of those Brahmanas had a vested interest to protect their own status. And therefore, for the sake of protecting their own status, they willfully misinterpreted these teachings to put emphasis on jati and to de-emphasize guna, which is to say that these Brahmanas perpetuated a misunderstanding of Scripture. It happened. It's unfortunate. If a teacher, if anyone has an ulterior motive, watch out. If they have an ulterior motive, they're not trying to teach you or help you, they're trying to manipulate you. And it happens. We have all been the victims of somebody else's manipulation at some point in our lives. It happens. People often have ulterior motives, and they can be ready to manipulate us. It's our responsibility to recognize that manipulation and reject it. To recognize the misinterpretation and reject it. So here we see here in book 3 of the Mahabharata, later in the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita, and I'm sure we can find other places in the Mahabharata where again and again Varna is taught not in terms of jati, Varna is taught in terms of guna, qualities. That's what's taught. What is scripturally taught is Varna in terms of gunas. So let's be absolutely clear. This is a huge political issue, but look at this. In so many books about Hinduism, written largely by non-Hindu authors, those books will say Hindu scriptures supports caste discrimination. That is said in countless books written by mostly Western authors. Is it true that Hindu scripture supports caste discrimination? What are we studying now? Hindu scripture. What does this Hindu scripture say? That there's no basis for caste discrimination, since the discrimination is always based on jati. It's not based on guna. If somebody discriminates against you based on your gunas, is it discrimination? I need to make that point. Suppose you are a person with a terrible temper, and then somebody says, suppose your boss says, suppose you have a really bad temper, your bad temper has come out at work again and again and again, and your boss, when it comes time for your review, your boss in your review says, you have a bad temper. And now you're upset. Why are you discriminating against me? You're not being discriminated against. You have a bad temper. This is your guna. So discrimination cannot be based on guna. Discrimination can and is based on jati. So let's be very clear that here we are, studying scripture. Does scripture support caste discrimination, or does scripture actually guide us against it? Isn't that what Yuddhishthira is teaching here? Is like telling you to avoid making any distinction based on jati. We're at the end of the class. I'm just going to make a complete left-hand comment. As someone not raised in India, I've always been amazed to look at politics in India. In India, which has a very secular, this is interesting observation. India's constitution, I haven't studied it, but I believe it's more secular than this country's, than America's constitution. I think the word God is pretty much absent from this country's constitution, but I think there are many, the word God is present. You know, even on you pick up a dollar bill, what does it say? God. So look at this. So politically, this country has God all over the place, but has managed to keep religion more or less out of politics. India seems to be the opposite. That is, even though the Constitution is very secular, and Nehru and all of those guys, they tried really hard to make it a secular constitution, but Indian politics is riddled with religious problems. And the problem I want to make, and again, as someone who's looking at India from the outside, this is what I observe as a complete outsider. Why is the Indian government making all of these divisions? This caste, this scheduled tribe, this group, that group, that group, that group, that group. From the outside, that looks to me like this jati business. They're making divisions. I understand that there's the divisions are meant for the uplift of those groups. I understand that they're meant for the uplift of those groups. I'm not sure it's working very well. I think one of the most direct results of those divisions, again, speaking as an outsider, the outsider observes it just leads to a lot of political, what do you call it, block votes, which is a real bane in Indian politics. Anyway, just as an outsider looking at Indian politics, it looks like a mess to me. Why is it such a mess? When emphasis is put on jati, it's a mess. When emphasis is put on guna, it makes sense. What is it saying? You should have the qualities of a brahmana. You should have the behavior of a brahmana. If you have the qualities and behavior of a brahmana, you are a brahmana regardless of your birth. And if you're born in the most brahmanic of families, I don't know what that means. How can you be more brahmana than brahmana? I don't know, but some people have that kind of pride. So suppose you consider that, Swamiji, my family is the most brahmana of all brahmanas family. I don't know. I've heard things like this. So what? What counts is not your family. What counts is your individual qualities, gunas, and your karma. That's what Sri Krishna says. Karmani prabhivaktani. These are distinguished according to the behavior which is based on qualities. So very clear that what the scripture teaches about varna is so clear. We need not have any doubt about it at all. Okay, we'll continue with this text when we meet next week. Some closing announcements. Tomorrow, Sunday, we have our program for children at 5. We have our usual mindful awareness meditation. Children at 11 o'clock. Our mindful awareness meditation is at 5 p.m. And then once a month, I'm conducting an advanced meditation session. That will be tomorrow, Sunday at 6:15. 5 o'clock mindful awareness meditation, 6:15 advanced meditation. You all know that we've been fixing the floor of the dining room, and it's come out quite well, the dining hall. Yesterday, we had a group of volunteers here for hours. What were they doing? Scraping up pebbles from the floor so you wouldn't step on them and have your feet bruised by that. Anyway, I thank those volunteers for their work yesterday. We're ready now to finish our dining hall remodeling. We need to put all the chairs and tables back. And what I would ask is, if a big group of you can stay back, it'll go really quickly. We need like 20 or 25 people. If we have 20, 25 people, you'll be done in 45 minutes. If we don't have enough people, then it goes on for us. So please, if you can, stay back. It should take just about 45 minutes, and you get all the tables and chairs back, get everything back where it needs to be. And then you can have some lunch together. The volunteers have brought some lunch. So please stay back after class and help. We need at least 20, 25 people to finish that conveniently. Library will be open after class, so we'll conclude with our prayers. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayah Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat.